It's time for everyone's favorite new game show, Flood Control Challenge. The show that answers the question, are you flood safe? And now let's meet the host, Eric Stay Away from Floodwaters Carrington.
Thanks, Johnny, and welcome to Flood Control Challenge, the game show that teaches you about flood topics. Let's meet our two contestants.
Hi, I'm Betty Hollister, Public Information Manager with the Regional Flood Control District. And I'm Carrie Ann Mokopathai, Public Information Coordinator.
Awesome, great to have you on the show. Well, as they say in show business, let's get ready to be flood safe. First question, it's a toss-up, so hands on buzzers. What are multi-use facilities? Betty.
Multi-use facilities are flood control projects that are used for other things like recreation and environmental protection. They are great places for families to play when not being used for flood control.
Right you are, Betty. Now let's take a look at these multi-use facilities with Fox 5 Chief Meteorologist Aaron Peck and Board Chairman Larry Brown at the Doc Romero Baseball Park.
So, Larry, we're out here on a beautiful complex of softball fields, but as I'm looking out towards beyond center field and left field, you're definitely not on a typical softball field. So when people come out here and play, how many people know that this is not a usual softball field and one that was designed with one purpose in mind?
Very few. In fact, if they have moved here since '99, they'd have no understanding of the history of this complex, because it's a basin that's critically important to the overall capital program, and yet we took advantage of a storm event and increasing capacity to create a public facility that is unparalleled, to be able to come in and use this mixed-use facility. And although we're in the summer, it's a little bit hot, during the year these 8 fields are absolutely abused by the residents, and that's what we want.
So even though it's not the most common situation that this is going to flood, it's still possible, and we're inviting people to come out here and play on the field. So if the weather's starting to look a little iffy, what do people need to keep in mind if they're coming out to this field?
Well, again, Darren, it's the common sense, that education awareness, especially with all the new residents coming in. We're still close to 7,000 per month. Many people that have relocated, myself from Boston, don't know the dangers of flooding in the desert. They think the desert, it doesn't rain, and yet Mother Nature can be so unpredictable and so devastating that we have to constantly remind them to become aware, understand the dangers, and then use common sense. In a facility like this, we have systems in place that the marshals will come, they'll warn them, but most people understand. Get in the car, get home, get to high ground. Don't try to, tempt Mother Nature when you see those streets flooded. And it all comes down to that common sense approach to flood control.
And to our viewers at home, remember, these multi-use facilities are here for your enjoyment. But when it starts to rain, stop the game. All right, on to our next question. Hands on buzzers. With more than 6,000 new residents moving to the valley each month, and many speaking only Spanish, how does the district get the message of flood safety out to our Spanish-speaking community? Carrie Ann.
Well, the district works with a lot of Hispanic companies like Univision to inform you and your family, no matter what language you speak, about flood safety.
Our role as a Spanish language broadcaster in Southern Nevada is a very significant one, with over 500,000 Hispanics and many others who speak Spanish and who tend to view and or listen to any one of our 4 media properties. We provide them with a wide variety of information, both in the form of news pieces as well as public service announcements, as well as entertainment.
The biggest challenge trying to communicate the flood message to the Spanish-speaking community is probably ensuring that you're culturally relevant in your messaging and finding the appropriate targeted media vehicles to reach them. A lot of ad agencies and trying to reach Spanish-speaking populations will take their English creative campaign and simply have it translated verbatim. And what that often does is take away the unique flavor or cultural significance of, say, you might have some slang or something that's unique to a certain culture that you're using. And in Spanish, the translation may mean something else entirely, or it may lose something, or it may not be as funny or meaningful. So what we do is we'll work with, rather than me try to pretend that have an understanding of Spanish culture, we'll work with partners. And in this case, we worked with Juan Saavedra at Univision.
People give us their time, watch our station, because they know they can depend upon us. They can depend upon us for information, and even on things that are not glamorous issues. They want to know information that they can't get anywhere else, in their language, in their context, and relevant to them. They know that day in, day out, we will provide that to them.
Right, Carrie Ann. Now we're all tied up at one apiece, but we'll be right back after this, so phone the neighbors and wake the kids, because there's more Flood Control Challenge after this.
I'm Agent Smith.
And I'm Agent Jones.
And we're busting people who pollute Clark County.
Hey, who are you guys?
Sir, please step back.
Hey, what are you doing?
Aha! Judged by your reaction, you don't like trash.
No.
Sir, this is yours. We saw you dump it out of your car.
Well, I was.
Sir, did you know trash can clog storm drains, cause flooding, and pollute Lake Mead?
Sir, is Clark County your home?
Yeah.
And you don't like trash in your home?
No.
Then why would you dump trash in Clark County? Don't trash Clark County. It's our home, too.
Hi, I'm Las Vegas City Councilman Larry Brown, and you're watching the Flood Channel.
Welcome back. Next question. Where does water in the Las Vegas Valley go when it rains? Carrie Ann.
Lake Mead, downhill from the west side of the valley to the east through a network of channels, detention basins, and storm drains.
Well, this is the Las Vegas Wash. It drains over 1,800 square miles within the Las Vegas Valley. This is where most of our flood control facilities that have been built to date, the 73 detention basins and 450 miles of channel and storm drains, drain to. And then further upstream from here is where they put in a lot of grade control structures in the lower Las Vegas Wash in the Wetlands Park area. And that slows the water down. The vegetation that you see here has a tendency to clean up that water. And so we're trying to be good stewards by pushing this water through wetlands so it can be polished more so before it gets into Lake Mead. Well, you've been on a mission following the water for 42 miles from the west side of the valley to the east side of the valley and into the Las Vegas Wash and ultimately Lake Mead. And that's just one part of our network of flood control facilities that have been built that are protecting the community.
Right again, Carrie Ann. You've taken the lead. Next question. What can people do around the house to protect the water supply? Betty?
Lots of things, like correctly draining your pool and using the right amount of lawn chemicals. Everyone plays an important role in protecting Lake Mead. Around the house, we do a lot of things that we don't think twice about, like fertilizing and watering the lawn, swimming in the backyard pool, changing the oil in our cars. But we all need to be aware that the everyday things that we do can be potentially dangerous to Southern Nevada's water supply. So my friend JC and I are going to show you how you, cleaning up your act at home, can play a big part in the quality of one of our most precious resources, water.
Okay, I'm done changing the oil in my car and painting the kids' room. Now I'm going to take this oil and paint, throw it in the trash, out of sight, out of mind.
What you've just seen is a perfect example of how not to do it. It only takes 1 quart of oil to contaminate up to 250,000 gallons of water. So unless you want to be the new captain of the Valdez, take it to an auto parts store where they can recycle the used oil. Now as for paint, Republic Silver State has special centers where they can either recycle it or dispose of it properly.
Okay, time to drain the old pool. Think I'll just take this hose and drain it out into the street.
No, no, no. The correct way to drain a pool is to use the drainage port. Now you'll find it in most new homes near the front of the house. If you have an older home and doesn't have a drainage port, what you can do is take a low volume pump and send that water right through your washing machine drain.
The more of this fertilizer you use, the more your grass will grow. That's my motto.
What you need to use is exactly the amount recommended by the manufacturer. If you do anything more than that, you're just wasting it for your yard, but you're sending contaminants downstream through the valley into the Las Vegas Wash and Lake Mead, where it can harm aquatic life.
In addition to learning how to correctly dispose of household chemicals and the legal way to drain your pool, as well as proper lawn care, the district wants you to log on to snwa.com, lvstormwater.com, and lvwash.org to learn more about what you can do to help protect the environment, like picking up after your pet, reporting clogged storm drains, and the benefits of using a commercial car wash.
Hey, Betty, I'm so excited about what I learned today, about what I can do around the house to help keep the quality of water safe for all residents of the valley. I think I'm going to do a cannonball in your honor.
No way I'm getting wet.
By the way, I must point out that the guy in that segment was very handsome. Way to go, Betty. Now you're all tied up at 2 apiece. But we'll be right back with more Flood Control Challenge after this.
See that clogged storm drain? Something like that, when it rains, will cause water to back up and flood our streets. Hello, Regional Flood Control District. I'd like to report a clogged storm drain. City and county employees are working hard to keep your storm drains clean. If you spot a clogged storm drain, call and report it.
Help protect the environment by keeping our drains and washes clean. Report clogged storm drains by calling 455-3139.
Hi, I'm Kim Runk. I'm with the National Weather Service, and you're watching the Flood Channel.
Welcome back to Flood Control Challenge. All right, ladies, hands on buzzers. Here's a toss-up. How do you drive in floodwaters? Yes, Betty.
The best answer is don't. Eric, people just underestimate the force of floodwater. Just a few inches of swiftly moving water can sweep even an SUV off the road. When we talk about dangerous road situations, when you get to rainy conditions, you know, with, like you were talking about, streets being slick, I would assume that, you know, that's even compounded.
It absolutely is compounded, because now we don't have as much time to react to a situation. And when we do react, we don't want to overreact.
The biggest reason car would skid would be lack of traction. And the reason people get into a lack of traction situation is typically too much speed. They're driving too fast for the conditions, and while 60 or 70 may be fine one day, the very next day it's not an appropriate speed due to the road condition. The most common type of skid would be a front wheel skid, and that's the most difficult skid to recover from. And what causes those type of skid typically are just a little bit of rain on the road. You know, when it sprinkles is actually more dangerous than when it's been raining for a couple hours. And the reason why is it doesn't rain often enough in Vegas, obviously. We get a buildup of oil and chemicals on the road, and so you get a little bit of sprinkling, and petroleum is lighter than water, so it floats to the surface. And so now you're driving on a surface of oil rather than a surface of asphalt. So that's the most common, and it happens when it sprinkles. The next step is, after it's been raining for a while, we start to get flooding. And cars, actually, they'll float just a bit. So if you're driving down the road and water builds up between the tire and the surface, you now have no control between your car and the road surface. So you can't do an accident avoidance maneuver. It's difficult to stop, it's difficult to change directions, change lanes, do those types of things. If you're just creeping along and it's curb deep to get through an intersection, that's a lot different. If it's flowing water, bad idea. Never go into a flowing water situation, because the current will overpower the gravity of the car. I mean, you only have so much that presses the car down against the pavement, and you're relying on those tires pressing against the pavement and the friction there to keep the car from floating away. The car's going to float just by design.
Great advice. Now you're in the lead, Betty, but it's still anyone's game. Here's the next question. Is buying flood insurance a good idea? Carrie Ann.
Well, Eric, a lot of people don't know this, but flooding is America's most common natural disaster. It can happen anytime, anywhere, especially here in the desert. So whether or not you live in a flood zone, everyone should know about the benefits of flood insurance.
I walked into my home and I just stood there. And there's 2.5 to 3 feet of water coming down into our property like the Colorado River. It looked like there was a river right outside of our home. The water, the force of the water broke through my front door, broke through the garage, and the water immediately started filling the house. It took my breath away to see all the damage, and you don't know what to do. You don't know where to start. You don't know how to react. I remember just standing there and crying for a couple hours before my adrenaline kicked in and said, I've got to start getting stuff out of the mud. Very first thing I did was call my insurance company. I assumed that my homeowner's insurance was going to cover it. Wrong. I still, the whole time, look back and think, if I had only had the insurance, if I had only had the wherewithal to take out flood insurance. It was inexpensive, and it would have saved me $50,000. I didn't let my daughter come home for 4 days because her room was destroyed. She stayed away. I couldn't let her come home and see what had been destroyed in her room.
Great job, Carrie Ann. Now we're all tied up again. Here's the next question. What has been done to control flooding? Betty.
The district builds flood control improvements to capture floodwater and carry it safely through the populated areas.
Our system is built on the process of moving water from the western part of the valley easterly in a safe manner to Lake Mead ultimately with all our detention basins and flood channels. And the issue comes down to truly connectivity. We build our detention basins and our flood channels, but there are certain spots that our system literally hasn't reached yet. And that's why people see that there's still flash flooding, there are still problems in the valley. It's important to understand that we can't just go out and build a system throughout the entire valley. It has to be where the connectivity and the channels and the safety, the measures are in place. But now we look, in 2002, we invested close to $40 million down around the Charleston underpass, which at one time was considered the poster child of flash flooding and damage and property. Every time it rained, and not the big storms, just nuisance water, that Charleston underpass would flood and it would close down. We invested close to $40 million, and since 2002, with even some major events, it has been dry as a bone, and not just the underpass, but all the business community within probably a half-mile radius. But we couldn't just go in and fix that. It was part of downstream and upstream improvements that had to be in place before the success of that project was obviously seen by the community. And those hot spots have diminished dramatically since the creation of the district.
Well, it was very frustrating because each time it rained, you had to stop what you were doing and run to the store, and then of course customers, when they hear it was going to rain, they wouldn't even come down here. Oh, it totally has stopped. The street here, it drains into storm drainage channels. It's just dry as a bone. I think it's one of the biggest bargains we've had. It's something tangible I can see from those tax dollars. And from what I've seen, that's one of the best spent tax dollars we've had. I see something coming from it, and I see continued progress in that.
Correct. Next question. How does the flood district track dangerous storms? Yes, Carrie Ann.
We have a number of ways that we monitor storms. Our flood threat recognition system and a partnership with the National Weather Service help us track storms when hours, minutes, and seconds can make a big difference.
We use a variety of data sources to track and assess the intensity of storms, primarily satellite and radar imagery, but also simple things like observations from the public and from alert gauges and sites at airports. And all of that is collected in a centralized place and integrated together to help us assess the potential for danger to life or property by any given storm. Two of our most important partnerships in Las Vegas are with our media partners and with the Regional Flood Control District. It's probably the healthiest relationship in any location where I've worked, and certainly beyond the sort of open sharing of data and information, we're aware that a lot of people get their information from places outside the National Weather Service. And so we can issue as many watches and warnings as we like, but if people don't hear about them, it doesn't really do anyone any good. This is a radar image. The brightness of the colors has to do with the energy that's returned to the radar. And so there's heavier rain or sometimes hail if we start getting into greens and yellows and reds. Then the other thing that we can see is what does it look like from outer space. This is a satellite imagery. Wow. And so that'll tell us a lot about where storms are going to develop over the next few days, and where the potential is for flooding and those kind of things. Where it's really meaningful, when you really feel like what we do makes a difference, is when we get into severe weather situations, and through partnership with people like the Flood Control District and the media, we can get a message out that may have helped save a life or certainly save some property. It's on those days that you feel like what we really do matters.
Nice work, Carrie Ann. And we'll be back with more Flood Control Challenge after this.
I want to show you some pictures your parents probably wouldn't want you to see. Pictures of parents making big mistakes.